Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast we are seeking to lead change, but also seeking to understand. We're also here as a platform to provide leaders to come together, to unite, to develop and empower other leaders in the areas of business, family, faith, and community. I am your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBrun, and today we are joined by special guest, Rusty Chadwick, Director of Winshape Teams. Put those clap emojis in the comments section, put those hands together for our special guest today, who is from Rome, Georgia. He is the husband and the father of two, director of Winshape Teams, and he's also the co-author of Teamwork, 13 Timeless Principles for Creating Success and Fulfillment as a Team Member, and he's an adventure enthusiast. And today, Rusty has joined us to have an incredible conversation about developing a team-first mentality. Hit that subscribe button there to our YouTube channel and all of our various social media platforms so you can hear more of this incredible conversation. Let's get right into the conversation, Rusty. You talked about your area of expertise is in team building. When many people think about teams, or I think about teams, I think about it from a sports aspect. I've been enjoying the NBA playoffs between the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks. And one thing about the playoffs is that's different than the regular season is that you get to play the same team in a 7-game series. That 7-game series, you can study the other team's moves, you can study their plays, and you can make adjustments by watching film. I went to your website and you had a quote there that knocked me off of my seat. And I want you to unpack it. The quote said, micro adjustments can lead to a major impact. What does that mean when you talk about those micro adjustments, Rusty, that leads to a major impact? Because I feel that a lot of times people want to make change, but they're fearful that they don't have enough movement or enough things to make a major change, or they feel like they have to make a major move to make a major change, so they don't make change at all. But you're saying that you can make a small micro adjustment and they can have a major impact. Tell us more about what you mean by that.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Lafayette. And thanks to both of you for having me on. I look forward to chatting with both of you. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, that's a great, I think for me, that really, you talk about sports and NBA playoffs. One of the sports that I really enjoy is adventure racing. And it's a little bit lesser known than NBA basketball, but it's a team sport where you travel hundreds of kilometers, oftentimes by bike and trekking and paddling, all under human power as a team, and use a map and compass to find checkpoints along the way. And one thing that you quickly learn when you're using a map and compass, and anyone out there who's done any kind of orienteering or used a compass in any way, it doesn't take long. If you're heading for a checkpoint about a mile away, if you get off a degree or two on your compass bearing, then you're going to miss your checkpoint by a long way. And the further you travel towards it, the further away you get from it. And that also works in the positive as well. And so when we look at that preferred future, that place we want to be, it is so tempting to think, oh, I got all these changes I want to make. And either we go all in and try to do these major things and they don't stick, or like you said, we get so fearful that we're so far from where we want to be that it's just too hard to change and we don't start. And so I think that quote really comes from the idea that when we take the pressure off of ourselves to try to make all this change at once and just think of one small thing that we can start tomorrow and do, and then do that again the next day, that the compounding effect of that over time will bring us much closer to where we want to be than where we are today. It's been a very empowering thought for me. And I think it really is encouraging for me and hopefully for others to think about the fact that those small adjustments over time can really bring us where we want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said taking the pressure off of yourself, because we do that so much. Much of the pressure that we feel on a day-to-day basis is not from the outside. It's that internal pressure that we put on ourselves, pressure to be better as a family man, pressure to be better in our business. And a lot of times the pressure is not even real pressure. It's something that we've made up. But you talked about taking the pressure off of yourself. And I think you're leading into the aspect of taking that pressure and making it to cohesive energy with other team members. Talk to us why that's important, to take that pressure off of yourself and to have that me, the us mentality instead of the I mentality. We've all heard the different quotes. There's no I in team, and teamwork makes the dream work. Talk to us, because that's what you specialize in. Why is it the team first mentality? Why is that important?
Well, I think, for anybody who's ever been on a team, sometimes those experiences are great and they're fulfilling. You talk about sports or other things, you can think back to those team experiences where it's really been amazing. The camaraderie was there and you felt strong. But a lot of us also have those experiences when you think about a team where you think, I kind of would have rather done it by myself. It would have been a little bit easier. It was more work trying to get along with everybody and get everybody together. I think of like a class project in school where it's sort of, somebody's doing all the work, somebody's not doing anything, and you kind of get this whole process. And I think that within that, over time, there can develop a sense that really my goal in the team is to, I think, remember the Titans, they said it best, I'm going to look out for me and I'm going to get mine. And the guy says, well, that's the worst attitude I've ever heard. That's not a team first mindset. But I think it comes from this sense that, who else is going to look out for me? I need to make sure that I get, the boss sees my performance, that I make sure I get ahead. Or if I do extra work for you, that's going to hold me back. But ultimately, I think when we can understand that a team truly, if you are a team, then we all win or none of us do. That's a team. That's how it works. You can't have, the wide receivers can't win the game while the quarterback loses. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so we all win or none of us do. And when we can switch that mindset to thinking that way, then all of a sudden it's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, but we get that compounding effect of 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 or 6. And the whole effort becomes much more in the results than it ever could be with one person by themselves or just a group of people working alongside each other. And so the team first mindset, I think, is critical in the fact that it points us to better results and brings those forward. But it also, in the end, is a lot more fulfilling than just working for yourself. And selfishness is in our nature. We all have those selfish components, but and it's contagious. But self-serving, but others serving is contagious as well. And when we start serving each other and putting the team first, that catches on too, and the outcome is usually much, much better than the alternative.
Yeah, you talked about sometimes it's I wish I could have just did that on my own. It would have came out better, because when I rely on somebody else, it comes out worse. And I could do bad all by myself. That type of mentality. But what does one do when you do have weak links on your team?
That's a great question. I think a few years ago, we set out to figure out what makes a team great. What's a great team look like? Because, you hear about it all the time. We want to know what does it. So we tried to say, let's find a team that has had sustained performance over time. They have been champions, and they've done it year after year. And we came across an adventure racing team. I mentioned adventure racing earlier, an adventure racing team from New Zealand. And they have won the world championships 6 years in a row. And so we said they're doing something right. Now, adventure racing is unique at that level because it's a team of 4, and you have to stay within 100 meters of each other all the time. And so you can't separate. And you're talking about, 5 or 6 days of racing day and night. You race all night long. The clock doesn't stop. And so this is a unit moving together. And so when you talk about weaknesses, that's one of the things we were looking for is, obviously there are going to be times where somebody's strong and somebody's weak, but you can't go forward without all the team members moving at the same time. And we wanted to see what made them so great. So we actually flew to this island off the coast of Africa in the World Championships in 2018. They were racing on Reunion Island, and we followed them, and we filmed them, and we interviewed them, and we studied what they did. And that year they won the World Championships again in 117 hours. And, as we interviewed them and watched them, what we found was there is no individual component. It's always a team mindset. And so if someone is struggling in the back, one of the team members who had been there prior said, we would never think of riding out in front and telling that person to go faster. That doesn't help them. You have to go back and help them go faster. If that means I put your backpack on and I carry it for a while so that you can keep up, that means later on when you come right, you can carry my backpack. And so when we're a team, it becomes less about saying you're weak, so if I could be stronger if you weren't here, but right. Saying where are the weaknesses here and how can I help build upon those or support those so that because we're all going to have them. And when we work together in that way, we're able to be much more successful.
Sure.
So less about the superstar, more about the team as a whole.
Yeah, I think what stood out in that is the idea that it's not even it it's not even thinking so much less about yourself, but recognizing that if we're working as a team, then our destinies are linked. The end goal is what we're pursuing. The common purpose that we have is not going to be achieved more effectively by me just pushing harder myself, but that when we are healthier together, then we're going to get farther. And so the whole mindset shifts. And so then we're able to share resources with one another and those kind of things, because they're not my resources, they're ours, they're team resources. So my knowledge, my resources, my staff, my budget, those kind of things all become shared resources that we use to achieve our common goal.
So what do you do then? Curious, if someone on the team does not have the sort of ingrained that team first mentality. We always have, every now and then there's that rogue person who has talent, who has potential. You think they could be a great team member, but sometimes, especially when someone's new to a team, they often feel the obligation to prove that they are worthy of the team or better than somebody or should be a part of this team, or they just need to prove themselves, maybe for their own ego. How do you work with that individual to explain to them, like, hey, this is a team before it's you?
Yeah, and I do think that is common, and it probably happens in both ways. You probably have some folks where they come in and they really want to prove themselves, and so they really are working individually to get the attention they need to show that they're capable of being there. And then you also have folks, I think, that try to hide in the team, that come in and think, hey, when I'm by myself on stage, or if I'm running a marathon alone, there's nowhere to hide. I mean, it's just me. So I've got to be on. But if I've got 5 people on the team, then maybe I can kind of duck the work a little bit, and it's going to get covered up by the group. And so you have folks that they can take that approach as well. And I think, obviously the approach you take with each of those situations would be different. But I do think that the fundamental beginning place is the team leader has to start by setting the tone and making sure everybody on the team knows what the philosophy, of that team is. And so there's a sense in which you have to begin by saying, this is going to be a team with a team first mentality. That is our culture. And if you're someone who's coming in thinking you have to prove yourself, then let me just, again, take the pressure off and free you from that thought, because that's not our expectation. But at the same time, if you're someone who thinks you might be trying to hide in the team, then recognize that's not going to fly here either. You're kind of setting those expectations early. With the first example you mentioned with the person who's trying to prove, I think there is an element, when I think about what makes a great teammate, and what actually we talk about this in teamwork, is the idea that the very first thing you need to do to be a great teammate is own your role. So there is a sense where you got to come in and say that my job description or the expectations for me are these things. And so I need to first, before I focus on anything else, focus on doing those to the best of my ability. So there is a sense which, as an individual team member, I'm still trying to make sure that I do everything that I have in my area of responsibility with excellence. And that is a way that I serve the team. But there's definitely a difference in that, and trying to say, to the exclusion of serving anyone else, I'm going to focus only on my own things to get the best individual result, no matter what that does to the team. And those are two very different, approaches.
Yeah. So like Patriot Football, they'll probably have a couple of regroup years, but nobody can argue that they had one of the greatest dynasties ever. And I'm not a Patriot fan, but I know from watching and kind of studying a little bit about how they developed that winning culture, they would have things on the wall, like the quote would just say, "Do your job," all through the training room. Do your job. And the focus was, you don't need to come out here and do his job or their job. You do the best at your job. You shine at your job, and that's good. The running back could be amazing, but if he doesn't allow the offensive line to block and create the hole, he's going to, one, take too many hits and probably not finish the season, but he's not going to get nearly as far. That's why a lot of college running backs get into the NFL and they have a hard time at first, because they just want to hit the hole and run, but the hole hasn't developed. They got to learn to slow down, let it open, then hit it. Similar. So I get what you're saying. It's basically succeed at your part. Don't worry about, Bobby's part.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, sometimes we can get caught up. There's a great story in the Bible that speaks to this, and it's been taken and used in other ways as well. But it talks about in the the times that were being written about there that, Roman soldiers could ask, other folks to carry their cloak for them. And so it talks about, when you're asked to carry the cloak 1 mile, go the extra mile and carry the cloak the second mile. And that's a way of demonstrating that you're not just going to do the bare minimum. And I think that, obviously there's so much wonderful to glean there. Something that stands out to me in that is to remember that in order for the second mile of carrying the cloak to actually have the impact that we want it to, you have to carry it the first mile first. And so we can't forget about the first mile. So in trying to do the extra or the other or the new thing that's going to elevate it, that only has the impact we seek when the first mile is done. So if you go into a bathroom and they've got beautiful mouthwash put up and it's got a hand towel there, but the toilet's dirty, then you're not going to, it's not, you have to start by the first mile and then you can do the extras. So
Right.
I was reading about those Roman soldiers once, and they were explaining the shield, and the purpose of the shield wasn't even for their own protection; it's for the guy next to them, and therefore they were totally reliant on the person on their other side to hold the shield properly for them.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Now we've talked about some obstacles, Rusty, but can you give us some specific common obstacles that hinder team performance? Because I feel like we know some of them, but I feel like there are others that maybe we overlook, as you said, we've overlooked in that first mile is why the team is not successful. What are those common ones that you've seen that hinder team performance? And what are some ways that team members can help his or her team members overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, I think, when we kind of spoke a little bit, one of, I think, the big obstacles to team success is, each person just focusing too much on themselves and forgetting that the team goal is the major benefit. I think, we talk about personal excellence being really important for a team member, owning your role. But beyond that, I think the antidote there is to think about owning more than your role once you've taken that first mile. And I referenced that adventure racing team that we studied. And one of the things that I thought was a really profound quote, Stuart Lynch, who's on the team, and has been a world champion 7 or 8 times over the years, so 6 with this team and then other teams. I asked him, what makes a great teammate? What makes a great adventure racing teammate? And he started out by saying what we've kind of talked about. He said, actually, it starts with being a little bit selfish. He said, let me explain that. When you first come in, you do have to make sure that you take care of yourself, that you're eating properly and that you're fueling properly and drinking water. Because if you don't do that and you try too hard to do everything for the team, then you're gonna be in a bad place and the team's gonna have to carry you through the race. But he said, once you've gotten past that and you're taking care of yourself properly, he said, we don't walk along thinking, am I doing everything I'm supposed to be doing? When I'm traveling down the trail with the team, what I'm thinking is, am I currently doing everything I can be doing to help this team be successful? Mm-hmm. Am I currently doing everything I can be doing to make this team? And I think that is so profound because there's a fundamental difference in that question than am I doing everything I'm supposed to be doing? We have to start there and make sure that we're doing that like we talked about. But if we stop there, then we're really only going to have individuals working alongside. It's really not a team. It's just, 5 people doing their role. And so in a sense, we have to say, we got to start there, but then we have to look around and say, what would help this team be successful that's currently not happening? And how could I step in and fill that gap? And that's the sacrificial service component that when you add it to personal excellence is just, I think, a recipe for a much more healthy and fulfilling experience. So I think that's one common challenge is focusing only on your own efforts and not looking for ways to serve in other things outside of your own responsibilities.
Yeah. What would you say to the individual that says, I'm not selfish. I want to be a good team member, but I also have my own personal goals as well. I also wanted to develop personally, whether in the leadership perspective or within the company, climb that corporate ladder. How can I do that if I'm just focusing on having that team first mentality? They feel like if I put the team first, it's going to hinder my own personal development or progress. What advice would you give to that person that has that thought process?
Well, I definitely would say, hey, I agree with you. I have my own goals as well. So I'd say, don't feel bad. It's not wrong to have individual aspirations. And I don't think the idea, and that maybe that's part of the challenge here, Lafayette, is that sometimes when we think about that team first mentality, it feels like we're saying, man, I have to sacrifice, success for myself or goals I might have for the sake of that. And actually, I think what we've seen is it's really not the case. That, when each person is working with the mindset to say, I want to serve this team so that we can perform at our highest level, then all the members rise at the same time. And so in a sense, when those results are accomplished and it's a fulfilling process, then ultimately we all win in that. And so there may be times where you're putting aside a personal objective to help someone else. But I think in the end, that the outcome of that is that the entire team performs better, and that serves the individual goals as well. Sometimes I think what we think is going to help us get ahead actually doesn't end up having that result. And there may be a few folks who get seen in that way for a time, but I think in the end, that's not really going to produce the outcome that we hope it will.
So you're saying that being a team member is preparation for having that more formal leadership position?
I definitely think that personally, I believe that servant leadership is the highest form of leadership. And so I think as leaders, we're called to serve, and that in serving others, that's where we're going to have the most powerful impact as leaders, when we influence through service. And I think that if we expect that we can be a teammate who is self-serving, but then when we become a leader, we would be other serving, it's not going to happen. Team when we're a team member, that's when the preparation happens. That's where we serve in those small ways. That's when we learn to be excellent in the individual responsibilities we have, and to look for the other ways we can serve outside of those. And that way, when we become a leader, we're already prepared for that. And I think when you think about leaders who are not others serving, who don't have that mentality, it's not a pleasant experience. We don't want to work for leaders like that. Sometimes that's maybe a way even to think for ourselves about whether we value this idea of servant leadership, to say, well, who do I want to work for? And do I want to work for a leader that's out to say, here's my ambition, here's my career goal, so I'm going to do whatever I have to achieve that, and whatever that does to you is just the way it is because I have my goals? Or do we want to work for someone that's saying, I want us to achieve our goals. I want to help you as a team member, as someone who reports to me, achieve your goals as well. And so if that's what we would want in a leader of ours, then we want to develop that for ourselves. And that really starts in the soil of team membership. And then, it grows as we become more formal leaders.
Sure.
So have you seen a big difference then in people who have positional leadership versus somebody who has obtained the same type of leadership, but through serving?
It's good.
You understand what I'm saying?
Maybe say a little bit more about that.
So, like John Maxwell has a book called 5 Levels of Leadership. And one of those is positional leadership. It's like the manager who was placed as a manager because he was a decent employee, but he never had a following. So anybody with he says defines a leader as anyone with a following. Right. But some people are leaders within their own right, that you don't have to be given the title of manager or director or whatever. You've just been leading. Right. A lot of people lead within their churches, will lead within their communities. There's no title. They've just been serving and leading, and they've had that servant leadership that they've been providing for a long time. Well, at the same time, though, we all know that we have all seen where within a company or organization or team, two people, for example, have been granted a leadership position, but one has been a servant leader and the other hasn't. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
What is it? And I feel the answer, but I'd like to hear your perspective on the difference of the person who's granted the positional leadership versus the servant leader.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think you hit on it when you talked about the followers. Like you said, I mean, the reality is that, people are likely to follow someone who they think has their best interest at heart. And if someone I totally agree with you that positional authority is just that. It's authority. It's not necessarily, doesn't mean you're leading. It means you have the authority to, be in charge. Or if you have a title, then you have a title, and that's there. It doesn't mean you're actually leading, even if that's the title that your title says so. And likewise, if you have no one who directly reports to you, you may have a lot of followers, and you may be leading very powerfully. Leadership is more about influence than it is about title. And I think that people respond to others who they can tell have their best interests at heart, who are for them, and who see them and know them and want to help them to achieve what they want to achieve as well. And so I think that if someone is in positional leadership, but they're not exhibiting servant leadership behaviors, then I think, pretty quickly they're going to realize that they don't have anyone really following them, except for in the ways that they must, for the job that they have. Whereas when someone achieves that opportunity because they were seen as someone who could effectively engage and develop others and rally them towards a common vision and invest in them and bring them together towards a common goal and achieve that goal, then I think that there's going to be a significant difference in the sustainability of their leadership, the future growth of their leadership potential, and everything else along the way. Not to mention the number of leaders that they create. I mean, I think that's what you're going to see with a servant leaders. They're going to be a factory for leaders. They're going to be growing new leaders because as they invest in people and serve them, and that's going to fuel the organization further. And then those leaders will, so it multiplies.
A factory for leaders. I love that. Yes.
Right along those lines, what would you say to a team or a team leader that feels like, hey, we work together well as a team, we're meeting our goals, but we have kind of hit a wall, and I can't seem to break through the glass ceiling? Per se. What would you say to that leader that's kind of discouraged, that says, man, I feel like I've taken the team as far as I can take it, and I can't really take it any further? What's some advice that you can tell them, hey, you don't have to give up or throw in the towel. Here's some things that you can do to break through that glass ceiling?
Yeah. And boy, I've felt that way for sure at times. And I think the first thing that came to mind when you said that is empower someone on the team I think that sometimes as leaders, we get burdened by the responsibility that feels like I need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to be the best. I need to be the most experienced. And sometimes even out of just the best intentions. And that might not be a selfish thing. It just could be, hey, I don't want to lose face here. I mean, I feel like I'm in charge. I've been given this responsibility. Everyone's looking to me. So I need to make sure that I'm the one that gets this team where we need to go. But the reality is if we have a strong team, then you've got, if it's a 5 or 6 person team, you've got 5 or 6 talented individuals. And so start asking those questions to say, here's an area team where I think we're kind of stuck and we're not really achieving the results that I think we can. Who on this team feels like they've got an idea or an opportunity that they could push us toward? Who could lead in that time? I think that sometimes we even get too rigid with those leadership and team roles to say, I'm a leader, I'm a team member, I'm a follower. But those roles are changing. When I think about a healthy team, we could be in a meeting and it could happen in real time. I might be leading the meeting and all of a sudden the topic shifts and Lafayette is an expert on this and he's got some ideas. Hey, you're off, you're leading, I'm following you at this point. And formal leadership title is no longer the key there. Or John steps up and we have a new project forming and we think I need to follow you right now or be a teammate with you because that's going to get us where we need to go. And the leader facilitating that and modeling that, I think, is a way to really raise that potential for results. But when you feel like you have to lead it all yourself, then yeah, I think we're always going to hit a wall or a ceiling at some point.
Sure. I think that's really good. Kind of that fluid leadership, that whoever has the expertise in this area, let them take the lead instead of that takes the pressure off of one person. That's really good. I haven't said like that before.
How do you get that environment to start? So let's take, for example, in our family company, there's times when somebody will continually come over and say, hey, will you look at this? Will you look at this? Or what do you think about this? Or will you approve this, John? Or basically wanting to know the next step. And as a leader, what I really want is more people to make decisions and not worry about making mistakes, to be quite honest. I'm like, just do it. You're not going to ruin the company. Okay. We're not going under because you put a bad graphic on something that should have been blue and you made it green. Our logo is blue, dude, right. But it doesn't matter. And so, but sometimes it can really bog down a leader when some leaders want to make all the decisions. I'm not that guy, but because what I really want is a pool of leaders, working like a strong, well-oiled machine, just moving forward. So how do you get, and I'm curious selfishly, to get your team to feel empowered? Because sometimes I'm like, maybe it's my fault that some people don't feel like they can make those decisions, or maybe it just takes more time. I don't know. Well,
you're not alone in that at all. And I think that, I have some thoughts there that are somewhat of a do as I say, not as I do sometimes, because my team would probably tell you that I do tend to be more of a hands-on leader than some. And sometimes that can be, I say hands-on to be generous to myself, but micromanaging can be my tendency at times. And I think that sometimes our best intentions at empowering folks can be limited by not even realizing the ways that we're unknowingly communicating that we need our hands in everything. And so when someone asks for our opinion on something, my tendency is to say, oh, well, I would probably change this or do that or do this. Even if I'm not meaning that to say, do it that way, they learn, oh, Rusty is always going to have a thought or two about this. And so I better make sure I know that so that he's not, thinking I'm doing it wrong because I didn't ask him. As opposed to, I'm trying to learn to say, if something's really not that important to me, I'll just say, no, I think it looks great. I'd go for it like it is. Even if there were 2 or 3 things I would have changed if it were mine to do, wow. I don't necessarily share those because I've learned over time that builds a mentality that makes sure Rusty weighs in, and it doesn't actually move people towards the empowerment decision-making that I want it to. And so that's one thing I found for myself, but I do think it begins and this is something that we hear a lot in the leadership space, but it really does begin by spending more time on the goals and the expectations and less time on the how. So if we can, as leaders, if we can spend more time saying, this is the outcome that I'm looking for, and less time on this is how I think you should do it, then over time, I think that space can fill in, and we can empower people more effectively that way.
Now, sometimes I think it comes down to they just need more time. So some people, they're given a role, but they just don't quite feel adequate because it's still pretty new. And if we continuously, I have this problem, like just go do it, just see what it looks like. They're like, I don't even know what step to take.
Right.
And so there is that part, which is the hard part for me. Like, all right, let's grind through this. But I guess what you're saying is almost like they're very good is probably better than my perfect, essentially.
Well, that's a really cool way to say it, because in a sense, you're looking at a couple different things there. You've got the specific outcome you're dealing with. So they're very good on this outcome versus my subjective assessment of my perfect. But you've also got the long-term objective of empowered leaders who make decisions for themselves. So sometimes you may be saying yes to a very good when you actually probably do have a perfect in mind that would have been 2 steps better. But the end goal of them making very good decisions for the long haul without you is much more important than 2 extra points on the scale here. And other times what we think is perfect to their very good might actually not even be as good as or better. And so there's that side of it too, where
because what if they're better? What if they get to be better than you are, and that's better for you both, right?
Yep.
So if I don't want them to think just like mine, because then whatever my perfect is going to be their perfect. But what if their perfect in 6 months is just killer? It's way better than mine.
Yeah. We tend to want to have a bunch of mini me's a little bit. Like, well, if you did how I did it and they do how I did it, then everybody does how I did it. Then we'd have this, everything would be done the way I want it done. And that totally misses the point of the value that each person brings, and the fact that we hired people for who they are because they have skills. And sure, I might look at something and think it should be this way, but that's because I'm looking with my eyes and my perspective, my worldview. But I've hired them for their perspective and their worldview, their talent. And so we have to really fuel that and recognize that, they can do it probably better than we could, and we got to let them go.
I think that's good, because it almost reminds me of, in sports, it's hard for former players to be coaches. Because they can't coach another player because they're thinking it from the perspective, why can't they do what I did? Why can't they get it? Like, Michael Jordan was a great player, but he's been a terrible GM. And because he has that mindset of, everybody's not Michael Jordan. Right? And so everybody can't be you. You have to be that individual and let people thrive in the success they are in through their own individuality.
Yes.
On your website, it talks about on Winshape's experiences that make stronger teams and leaders. I love that. And the aspect of team retreats. I'm interested in that because I think that falls into building that culture. And we're huge here on Unscripted about building that culture. Talk to us about that experiences, those team retreats, and how that can empower your team even further.
Yeah. Yeah, culture is so important, and I mean every team has one, so I guess every team's got a culture of some sort, but what type of culture is that? And I started at Winshape 11 years ago, and I remember one of the first experiences that just really stands out to me was our first annual staff retreat, and we do one every year, and we missed last year with coronavirus, so we're due a big one this year, but. That first one, we went as a team to Cumberland Island in Georgia, and we didn't know where we were going. So you showed up, 20-some people on our team, and they didn't tell us where we were going. So we had our bag packed in the parking lot, and we got in a van, and we didn't know where the van was going. And so we had to get the van to the location, which ended up being Cumberland Island. And then we paddled out to this island, and we camped there, and we sailed, and we paddled home. On the paddle home, it was stormy. The tide was hard. It was very, very hard. We had team members that really struggled. Some had to get in canoes or kayaks with each other to help get home. And then when we got done, we feasted. We feasted at a restaurant. And it was one of those where it was like, hey, order anything you want and just go for it. And I remember thinking back on that time and realizing that we have a building community model at Winshape that we use. And we say that to build a strong community, you need 5 components. You need a powerful purpose. There needs to be challenge to change for the individuals in the group. We need to have sacrificial service. We need to spend time together, and we need to celebrate and mourn together. And when I look back on that experience, I think why it was so impactful for me is because every one of those components was there. We had to serve each other on that team and be served. We got to celebrate at the end. We were put in hard places where we had to be challenged to change. And so I think that those shared experiences, you come back to a workplace after something like that, and it's a whole different world. And every team is not able to do that type of experience. That every team's context is different. But I do think that when you can take intentional time to focus on building team skills, how we resolve conflict, how we give feedback, how we have meetings, whatever it may be. And then to add into that, building relationships, building community, knowing and being known, that those will come together to be hugely beneficial. And both are key. I mean, if I had to choose, it's hard to say, but I think that the relational aspect of that, the knowing is at least as important, if not more important than the skills themselves. But obviously, we have to know how to team as well. But I think the time spent investing in that group provides a lot of relational equity that can cover a lot of things in the future.
Relational equity. That's great. That's great. That's great, because a lot of people are trying to make withdrawals from a person or a group of team they haven't made any investment in. They have no equity there, and that's why you can't get the withdrawal, because there's nothing to withdraw from.
Yes.
I think that's great. John, did you have anything else, bro?
This the one thing that came to mind was in corporate America, a lot of as companies grow, it goes from companies trying to do group activities to teams within the company trying to do group activities. I used to be a part of a big company, corporate America, and they're always trying to figure out what can we do. Obviously, a team retreat would be amazing, but maybe for a management group that would work. Mm-hmm. But often, from my perspective, is equally as important as a well-gelled management team is the management and his team. Because often companies will spend lots of money for the management group to go off and go fishing or something like that. Great. They get to see each other. They play poker at night. They have some laughs. Hopefully they do something constructive. But rarely did I see it from the management / supervisors and their team, which is probably anywhere from 10 to 20 people in a lot of cases, maybe 30. And so I would see these groups say, hey, we have funds to do something as a team. And so they would go bowling or something like that. And honestly, it just never seemed effective. They would go bowling during a lunch hour after work, come back, and then leave. Our team, what we had done is we decided, and maybe you can speak to this, and it was kind of lucky. He said, what should we do? Maybe we can go do something for the community. Just throw out some ideas. And somebody had said, hey, there's this organization that we can serve, and they fit. It's called Shoes for the Shoeless. And what they do is they go into schools and they fit children of need with brand new shoes. And we were like, I'm thinking, I hate feet, but okay, So we went and did it. You get out of work for a couple hours, whatever. That's why most people start. But what I found was we all went and did that, and we came back, and at least half the department was like, hey, let's do this every month. This would be amazing. And most did for a couple of years. Every month they go serve this organization. But what it helped was there was always those people you work with, and you're like, oh, Susie, she drives me crazy. She doesn't work nearly as hard. She's always coming in late. You only see her from a work perspective. But when we went to serve, it's like you almost saw the more human side of the person, and how she actually has a great heart, and she's really good with the kids and so forth. Yes, she comes in late still, but you just have a new respect for her because you've seen more than just her sneaking into the cubicle at 8:05 or 8:10. Does that make sense? And so that had worked really well for us. But is there things like you would recommend? How can a small team within a company or so forth, what can they do to sort of help create that, as you called it, relational equity?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think the way you were sharing about that made me think that there really are a number of different objectives or outcomes that a team might seek in a retreat or an experience. And so I think about it like, you might have something that's more of a team bonding experience. It's really designed to just to get some time together and build some relationships. And that's, like you said, people try things like, there's any number of options you can do for that. Anything that gets you spending time and enjoying time together does help you to see people outside of at least the office workplace. But I do think it has to be part of an intentional effort overall, because like you said, it can kind of fall flat if you go bowling once a year for an hour over lunch. It's not really going to make a huge impact. So if you can have an intentional approach to say, we're trying to create these touch points for just relationship building, I think that's good, and certainly very important. But I think that beyond that, that's great. When you talk about serving on a retreat, that puts you in a whole new context, and you get to see someone in a giving of themselves. That can be very important. When you give yourself more time, so an hour or two doing an activity, you're only going to see so much of someone. But when you are able, if you can get for an offsite or at least a full day experience, then you can kind of start to let the walls down a little bit. What we do in our retreats, or what we try to build into those, is really a combination. I mean, obviously you're looking for the objectives of the team, but there is a time for creating space for those real conversations. I mean, you are trying to say, if we're team development and team relationships are very important, but the reality is that we all know that conflict is going to be present, and conflict is not a bad thing. But if we don't know how to manage that, then it can be very hard for us. And if I know that there's someone on our team that I'm really have an issue with, or there's no trust, then at some point we do have to engage that, and we have to say, hey, I think the trust is low in this team, and here's why. Here's why I actually don't trust this team, and I don't feel safe to share it all. Or I feel like if I make a mistake in this team, I'm going to be just shot down for it, and everyone's going to hate me. So I just pretty much keep myself over here, and I don't try anything new. And that's how I'm approaching this. And we have to create some space for that conversation, and having a facilitator that can say, hey, say more about that. You referenced the mistakes. And I remember a time very vividly where a leader, I was working at a ranch in Colorado, and it was training. And one of the young gals who was learning to be a waitress was coming out to serve us. And they were practicing, so all the staff were in there eating dinner for them to serve. And she dropped a plate, and it shattered on the ground. And I'm thinking how mortified she must have been as a new staff member. The owner of the ranch picked up his cup and saucer off his table, and he threw it in the air, and it shattered on the ground. And that moment to me was this incredible example of a leader setting the tone to say, hey, mistakes are going to happen. We're not going to worry about it. Okay, be yourself. And so those types of things, that you can, that leaders can do. And I think about that in the context of a retreat, when you create the environment for the conversations to happen and those things to build, and that example just kind of came to my mind, even though it wasn't a retreat, that's got to happen too. And so I think we have to think from a team perspective about how do we get away from the workplace, not just to build relational equity, but also to create space to engage around the things that will truly help us be more effective from a skill perspective as well.
Excellent. So as that leader, not making her feel like she's a standalone, but jumping right in there with her. That's amazing. This has been an incredible conversation. We don't want our audience just to stop listening and connecting with Rusty here, but we want you to connect and follow Rusty on his various social media platforms. His LinkedIn, his Facebook page is Winshape, that is WINSHAPE Teams. On LinkedIn and Facebook, that's the page there, Winshape Teams. And the Instagram handle is at Winshape Teams. You also can connect with Rusty via website at www.winshapeteams.org and www.teamworkbook.co. Rusty also has a book and a documentary. The book is Teamwork, 13 Timeless Principles for Creating Success and Fulfillment as a Team Member. And the documentary is called For the Team, which is available on YouTube and also Amazon Prime. He also has the organization there, the Winshape Teams, where they offer team retreats, open enrollment leadership experiences, coaching, articles, blogs, and other resources that will help enable your team and your leaders propel them to the next level. As always, we want you to continue to follow us on our YouTube channel there on the bottom of your screen, Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. You can also follow us on our various social media platforms, Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast on Facebook. Our Instagram handle is at Unscripted Leadership. We're also on LinkedIn at Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast. Those of you that are part of our listening audience, any podcast platform, you can stream our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Stitcher, and so forth. Wherever podcasts are provided, you can find us there, Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, and connect with us on our website there, unscripted-leadership.com. We've got some amazing things in the works there for you. And also we have merch available there. When you sign up for our Unscripted email group club, you'll receive a 10% off merch promo code that's available there on unscripted-leadership.com. Again, we say thank you to our special guest, Rusty Chadwick, director of Winshape Teams, for coming on and having this incredible conversation with us about developing a team-first mentality. As always, we're here to build bridges and not walls. Bridges connect and walls divide. Until next time, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be. God bless you.